All right, we're rolling. And action.
If you've seen any of our other films, you've probably realized by now that we like to sprinkle a little bit of comedy and surrealism into the story. We often include absurd monsters living in the freezer for 1,000 years, a giant outside your window getting revenge for squashing a spider, a closet carrot grandma, or sometimes we just use crazy colored lighting techniques. Well, in this one, we felt like just going for pure horror. No weird lighting choices or funny monsters, just something to give you nightmares. So here's how the story came about. We had both been wanting to make a short about a super tall man with extra long arms because we both agreed it was really creepy and unlike any other monster we had created before. We just couldn't think of a good story. So here's what we did. A couple weeks ago, we asked all of you what you're most afraid of. We got a variety of answers. One in particular actually inspired us to write this story. Well, it was mainly Victoria who wrote this one. So thank you all for these amazing answers, and a special shout out to this person for sharing their fear of tiny words written against solid backgrounds. We shot about 98% of the film over the course of 2 nights. The other 2% consisted of the final shot in the end credits, which we actually shot about 15 minutes before releasing the short. Our friend Wes came over and stood in the closet for a few seconds, so thanks Wes, you have awesome feet. The other shot was a reshoot of Victoria's reaction when the shoes first slide away. The first time we did it, the reaction wasn't big enough and didn't come across as realistic, so we both decided to just set up the lights and do it again. Since we wanted a very naturalistic style, the lighting turned out to be a lot easier than our other shorts. First, I swapped out the light bulbs with a daylight LED in both the closet and in the kitchen. White light just looked a lot better than the ugly orange color that was there before. I put our biggest, brightest ring light outside on the patio and shined that in through the window. You could see it in the background on a couple takes. Whoops. The most difficult shot to light was this handheld shot right here when Victoria notices the shoes in the hallway. I put a light in the bathroom behind her and shaped it with tinfoil. Wes was in there holding a reflector so that the light wouldn't reflect too much on the wall, causing some ugly glare. Normally, I shoot all of these shorts on a tripod or a dolly just because I want it to look smooth and cinematic. But since realism was the goal on this one, I decided to take the camera off the tripod for once and to go almost entirely handheld. The first third was shot on sticks, but once the scares come into play, we transition over to this handheld style. My back was killing me at the end because I don't have one of those easy rigs to mitigate the weight of the camera, but I took breaks and maybe I'll book a full body massage this week or something. Creating the monster was a combination of practical and some basic VFX in After Effects. First, Victoria put me in makeup.
When we dreamed up this monster, we both agreed he should be this creepily tall shadow man and that Aaron would play him. I remembered the lesson I learned on Chain Letter with the monster, Smiling Harvey. I love that short, but the last shot always left something to be desired for me. So for the tall man, I knew I would get rid of Aaron's hair with a bald cap and really layer on the makeup to try and help him disappear into the character. I used BFG bald caps, which I applied with Prozaid to help it stick around the edges, then dabbed a bunch of white clown makeup all over his face. From there, I applied some black face paint just to dirty up the white, and then a few chunks of toilet paper, which were drenched in liquid latex, to make his face a little more deformed. Our friend Wes supplied this great burgundy suit and dress shoes, and voila, the tall man is upon us.
Or the keyboardist of a Russian 80s pop band is upon us. Either way, it's safe to say I looked pretty damn weird. The first time we see the tall man appear in the hallway, I was just standing on a chair holding a pair of pants down to the floor. For this shot, where we see the entire body of the monster, I put the camera on a tripod, ran into place, and just stood there while Victoria went through the entire action. In After Effects, I created a mask around myself, and then using the puppet tool, I could stretch my body around until it looked somewhat realistic. I animated some basic movement of my head and arms just so that it felt alive. Lastly, I applied the warp stabilizer effect to a completely separate handheld shot and then used those motion keyframes on the final VFX shot to give it this fake handheld look. It's really subtle, but I think making this look as though it were handheld really adds to the realism. For anyone interested in creating this fake handheld effect, I have an in-depth tutorial on my other channel, Cineguac. I'll leave a link in the description. For the final shot, I stood on a chair behind Victoria and opened my mouth as wide as I could. In After Effects, I used the liquefy effect to stretch the shape of my mouth and then parented that to the motion tracking info. I also motion tracked both of my eyes and then masked a small shape near my forehead so I could use it to cover up whatever I wanted. I moved the mask on top of each eye and feathered the edges so that it would blend in naturally. And that's pretty much it. The sound of his roar was 3 separate recordings of me making weird noises, which I sped up and slowed down and then layered on top of one another. Originally, I made a version of the final shot with these small red demon eyes, but after showing it to Victoria, she wasn't all that impressed. She suggested I make a version with no eyes, and after getting a few opinions, we decided no eyes was actually way scarier. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. Which version do you think is better? As always, the music came from Robot Disco Puma at his studio in Miami. He makes most of his sounds on this keyboard and then mixes in Ableton. Sometimes I'll adjust the speed of a drone build or sting if I want to deepen the sound or change the duration so that it matches the action perfectly. He gives me a ton to work with and it's always mind-blowing, so if you're looking for a composer, hit him up. And of course, thank you once again to all of our patrons.